Could the secret of life on Earth be hidden within the ancient pyramids of Egypt?
The Great Pyramid is evidence of a phenomenal knowledge of the science of astronomy.
To build the Great Pyramid in 20 years would require a technology we don't have today.
If the ancient Egyptians could not have built these fantastic structures, then who did? Was the great medieval psychic Nostradamus able to predict the future?
He was a master astrologer, master psychic.
He saw future events with remarkable clarity.
Nostradamus accurately predicted the Challenger shuttle disaster.
Can we afford to ignore his warnings for these final years of the tormented 20th century? Besides the Americas, did Christopher Columbus discover another, more sinister world?
Einstein had a theory that the Bermuda Triangle was an interdimensional doorway to another world.
Do we really know what is behind all the disappearances of ships, planes, and people in the mysterious Bermuda Triangle? Is a connection between the supernatural and mankind scientifically provable?
What could, from a dead body, create such an image?
Right now, space science may be unlocking the nature of the Shroud of Turin. Is this the face of Jesus Christ? The ancient people who lived on our planet had knowledge and technology that we today do not understand. They were able to accomplish feats that we have been unable to duplicate. Even with the help of powerful computers and our most advanced space technology, our scientists are unable to determine how they did it. I'm Darren McGavin, and we're about to explore some of the most fascinating and astounding ancient mysteries of the world. There is an ancient Egyptian proverb that says, "Everything fears time, but time fears the pyramids." They are the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world to remain standing, and they are still the largest human constructions on Earth, if indeed they were built by humanity. No one even knows where the word pyramid comes from. There are no roots for the word in any language on Earth. We have been to the moon, but the pyramids remain a puzzle wrapped in an enigma, hidden in timeless mystery.
As an Egyptologist, the only mystery I can see about the pyramids is that people still consider them a mystery.
Not one of the traditional concepts about the pyramids or the builders has been proven.
They are simply monumental tombs built for Egyptian pharaohs.
No dead king or any other mummified corpse has ever been found in the Great Pyramid. Everything else about this ancient wonder remains a mystery to traditional thinkers, which leads us to believe that a higher power was involved, whose purpose was much more significant than entombing a pharaoh.
This is a very old and a very heated controversy. Even as Alexander the Great stood in awe before the pyramids, his generals were arguing about how they came to be. But whatever else they are, the pyramids are a reality, and realities can be measured and quantified. From the watchtowers of the Babylonian astrologers to the astrophysics labs of today, many, many scientists have long been agreed. The Great Pyramid of Khufu could not have been built with the quasi-Stone Age technology of 2900 BC. Yet, there it is, 42 stories high, covering an area of 10 football fields, an almost solid mass of 2,500,000 intricately fitted stone blocks, weighing from 2 1/2 to 10 tons. Enough stone to build more than 35 Empire State Buildings.
It's doubtful that ancient Egyptians had any knowledge of modern geology, and without this science, it's inconceivable that a structure this size could be built which would not crumble from lack of a proper foundation. Normally, it would just sink slowly into the ground. In modern construction, engineers find a settling rate of 6 inches in 100 years acceptable for office buildings. The U.S. Capitol, for example, has settled 5 inches during the past 200 years. In 5,000 years, the Great Pyramid, weighing 14 billion pounds, has settled less than 1/2 inch.
In modern construction, if the builders could maintain each side of the 756-foot wall within 6 inches of being perfectly straight, then it would be a tremendous accomplishment. But the Great Pyramid is only off of straight alignment by approximately 1/4 of an inch. That's totally impossible to duplicate in today's modern construction field.
Originally, the Giza pyramids were covered entirely with finely polished white limestone. On his first expedition to Egypt under Julius Caesar, Mark Antony said the Great Pyramid could be seen from a distance of 100 miles, shining in the sunlight like a precious jewel.
The 115,000 outer casing stones, weighing up to 10 tons each, were removed in the 14th century to build the city of Cairo, leaving the pyramids at Giza as they are today. Now, these casing stones were fitted to tolerances of 1/2000th of an inch, so precise that a razor blade cannot be inserted between the joints.
But it isn't just construction experts who find the pyramids mind-boggling. Astronomers and mathematicians also find the structure truly amazing.
In building the Great Pyramid, architects utilized several highly advanced mathematical concepts not even discovered until thousands of years later. Now, how the architects came by these yet undiscovered mathematical concepts simply defies imagination.
Just as the construction techniques are still baffling, so is the relationship of the Great Pyramid to the Earth and to the stars.
The geographical orientation of the Great Pyramid of Giza is perhaps its single most amazing characteristic. Its sides run almost exactly from north to south and east to west. The deviation is within 3 arc minutes from true north. How could an ancient quasi-Stone Age culture have been able to determine true north?
The Great Pyramid is evidence of a phenomenal knowledge of the science of astronomy. They could measure the day, the year, and the precession of the equinoxes. They knew that the Earth was a sphere, and they knew how to compute latitude and longitude accurately.
But there have always been many investigators that think the pyramids transcend earthly measurements and that they are paranormal in nature. In the latter years of the 19th century, pyramidology came into being. This is a study based on the theory that the Great Pyramid was a cosmic force collector, operating on principles similar to the electrostatic condensers in our modern electronics. This concept has drawn the interest of many scientists and pyramid theorists.
There's a vortex of energy emanating from the apex of the pyramid, which actually expands in diameter as it rises higher and higher into the heavens. A simple example of this emanating apex energy was first demonstrated by British inventor Sir W. Siemens. When he drank from the wine bottle he brought along, he experienced a slight shock as the bottle touched his lips. The electrical activity intrigued Siemens so much that he took a wet newspaper, wrapped it around the bottle, converting it into a crude electrical accumulator, which most high school science students would recognize as a Leyden jar. Although we don't know why or how, the Great Pyramid seems to be an accumulator of energies.
Schools have long taught, as established fact, that the Great Pyramid was the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu. This theory is based on an alleged discovery of his royal cartouche, Khufu's name and seal in the so-called burial chamber. But this theory has been badly shaken by some recent and shocking discoveries.
There is no hard evidence anywhere that the pyramids were ever intended to be burial tombs for the pharaoh kings. Although the standard archaeological argument is that these tomb chambers were robbed of their contents.
The pyramid builders left Khufu's name in graffiti on huge blocks above the ceiling of the burial chamber, graffiti that no one saw until 1837.
Concerning the hieroglyphic graffiti, I discovered this to be a forgery done in May of 1837. I received a letter from a Mr. Allen in Pittsburgh. It was his great-grandfather who witnessed Mr. Hill going in with the red paint and brush to achieve the forgery. When the great-grandfather objected, he was fired from his job and banished from Giza. Examining a facsimile, it became obvious to me that it was a forgery because Mr. Hill misspelled the royal name. Instead of writing Khufu, he wrote Raufu, which would have been like taking the name of God in vain, something which would have never happened.
With so many intriguing possibilities, does it still seem reasonable that the Giza complex is nothing more than a massive graveyard for royalty?
In spite of the bizarre and science-fictional theories about these pyramids at Giza, they were and are nothing more than funerary monuments built around 2600 BC. Giza is a funerary complex, nothing more, nothing less.
There is a burial complex at Giza, but that hardly proves that Giza is only a burial complex. It would be much the same as considering the Cathedral of Notre Dame a burial complex because there's a graveyard beside it.
The Sphinx was erected by Khafre, the builder of the second pyramid, and many Egyptologists believe the face bears a distinct resemblance to his own.
Also, attributing the Sphinx to the pharaoh Khafre has become untenable. Recent archaeological and geological discoveries demonstrate that the Sphinx is at least 10,000 years old and maybe even older.
Of the many misconceptions about the pyramids of Egypt, one that stands out is the mythical curse of the pharaohs. It grows out of the activities of opening the tombs, like Tutankhamun's in the Valley of the Kings, some 350 miles distant from the Great Pyramid complex at Giza.
The curse of the pharaohs story begins in the 1920s when two Englishmen, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon, discovered the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Among the spectacular riches, Carter and Carnarvon uncovered a tablet on which a dire curse had been written. Death will slay with his wings whoever disturbs the peace of Pharaoh. The warning did not make them nervous, but they were afraid their native assistants might panic and quit. They crossed out any mention of the tablet's discovery from their records and tossed it into the rubble. The whole incident might have been forgotten forever had not some 36 scholars and others connected with the excavation died sudden and mysterious deaths. Carnarvon and Carter were about to uncover the mummy itself when Lord Carnarvon became deathly ill. Although suspecting an infection, doctors were uncertain of a diagnosis. He died before his son reached his bedside, and precisely at the moment of his death, an unexplainable power blackout occurred all over Cairo. Another victim was American architect Arthur Mace, who had been the person to rip out the last piece of wall blocking the entrance to the tomb. He died in the same hotel with the same symptoms as Carnarvon, feverish and in a sudden coma. The morning after Carter had shown his friend George Gould the tomb, Gould awoke with a high fever. By nightfall, he was dead. Radiologist Archibald Douglas Reed was the first to cut the mummy's wrapping and x-ray it. Reed died aboard ship on his way home to England.
What caused these untimely and coincidental deaths among the invaders of King Tut's sacred tomb? Could they have been caused naturally from inhaling an ancient bacteria or virus? Dr. Ezzedine Taha, an eminent physician and biologist in Cairo, held a press conference in 1962. He claimed discovery of an ancient microscopic fungus that had probably survived in a dormant state for thousands of years, which could be controlled by modern antibiotics. Ironically, before he could prove his theory, Dr. Taha was killed in a freak automobile accident. Later autopsy revealed he had died of the same circulatory collapse as the others and may have been already dead before his car careened off the road. Could it be that there is something to the curse of the pharaohs? Or, as many pyramidologists are now theorizing, that the deadly virus that killed all these people was literally from out of this world? Could a Stone Age people have built these pyramids that cannot be duplicated today? New evidence we are not alone in this universe when we come back with a chilling discovery. The more we learn about the Giza complex, the more unsure we are of conventional theories for explaining the mysteries of the structures in this Great Pyramid. If conventional theories do not explain the purpose for the pyramids, what do more contemporary theories have to offer?
In 1813, astronomer Richard Proctor discovered from ancient records that the Great Pyramid had indeed been used as an astronomical instrument.
The pyramids are essentially crystalline in structure, and therefore highly receptive to radio-like energy waves or even cosmic microwaves. The Great Pyramid at Giza, with its 5 granite slabs above the king's chamber, are what the ancient Egyptians called spirit stone, and they could have been a massive receiver-transmitter tuned to some distant part of the universe of which we are still ignorant.
Based on evidence provided by Sumerian texts, it appears that the Giza pyramids were built as beacons by extraterrestrials as part of a landing corridor ending at a spaceport in the Sinai Desert.
There are numerous theories about the purpose of the Great Pyramid at Giza, ranging from the preposterous to the ingenious. But what is distinctly missing is how in this world were they built?
The Greek historian Herodotus visited the Giza site in the 5th century BC. He wrote that the Egyptians of that time told him that a continuous crew of 100,000, replaced every 3 months, worked a period of 20 years to build the Great Pyramid.
To build the Great Pyramid in 20 years, as some archaeologists claim, would have meant setting one of those huge stones every 3.5 minutes, 24 hours a day. That would require a technology we don't have today.
It's difficult to justify the premise that the Great Pyramids were built with primitive stone and copper tools. These people had no knowledge of the wheel as a means of transportation. No pulleys, no modern surveying equipment, winches, derricks, or block and tackle. Hundreds of blocks weighing 30 tons are situated high in the Great Pyramid. The only mechanical devices that they had were the lever, the roller, and the inclined plane.
But setting the stones in place was only one of the problems. Bringing the stones from the quarries to the construction site was an equally imposing task.
They were moved on huge sledges or pulled across a bed of rolling logs. Those stones that came from the distant quarries were barged downriver to the site. A great causeway led from the river landing, and the stones were moved up its mile length. Once on site, the stones were pulled up ramps and levered from tier to tier and then set in place. The process was incredibly labor-intensive and perhaps the greatest single effort of men working together to accomplish a dream.
There is a widespread general belief, which Hollywood has helped to promote, that hundreds of thousands of slaves were used to build the pyramids. Nothing could be further from the truth.
The Egyptians of the 4th dynasty were neither a formidable military nation nor a very aggressive one. But even if they were, there were not enough potential slaves within a 5,000-mile radius to have supplied the workforce needed.
The generally accepted academic viewpoints are divided equally between the rollers and the rampers. These two theories are being taught in the schools right now as facts when they're not even substantial theories.
With the Ramper School of Egyptology, we are asked to believe that a mile-long ramp was built, rising in slope as the pyramid increased in height. Actually, it would have required more effort to build the ramp than to build the pyramid itself. There would have been some 6 billion pounds of construction garbage to get rid of afterwards. But where is it? Does anyone know?
This question is one which even the most adamant of the ramp theorists cannot answer. But what about the log roller theory? Couldn't the stones have been moved to the site this way?
Moving a given stone in this manner can be demonstrated, but some rather obvious consideration should have dispelled this notion long ago. The only trees available in ancient Egypt were date palms, and as a food source, it's unlikely they would have been cut down. Importing logs would have required more shipping than Egypt has ever possessed in its entire history, just to transport the 25 million trees needed. Next, it's virtually impossible to roll a log on stone-chip roads. But even if they could be rolled, the great weight of the stones would have crushed the logs to pulp within a very short distance.
There must have been another totally different method of lifting and moving these tremendously heavy stones, a device that would make the moving of these massive weights feasible. However, we know of no such device available in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians were not the architects nor the builders of the Great Pyramid.
Dr. Joseph Davidovits and I advocate that the pyramid blocks are a superior form of concrete. This is a sample from the ascending passageway of the Great Pyramid. Some geologists have studied it and agree that it is man-made rock.
The Great Pyramid was the greatest single undertaking in the whole history of mankind. And yet there's not one picture or drawing, not one artifact, not one inventory or tally sheet to tell of its construction. The Egyptians left us some 3,000 years of written and pictorial history, covering virtually everything that happened in their culture, from babies being born to plowing and harvesting, building, weaving, sacrificing, praying, embalming, but nothing about the pyramids of Giza. Why?
If the Egyptians did not build the Giza Pyramid Complex, who did? Well, there are experts who tell us recent discoveries on the planet Mars could possibly give us those answers. Richard Hoagland, a former consultant to NASA, did not discover the now famous face on Mars, but he is the prime force behind the Mars mission, a private organization of international scientists whose findings have captured the world's imagination.
A NASA Viking scientist, Dr. Tobias Owen, actually discovered the first of the monuments of Mars in 1976, a gigantic mile-long human-looking head lying in a northern Martian desert. In 1979, two NASA-contracted imaging analysts later discovered that there were two photos of the face taken at two different lighting angles by the Viking spacecraft, as well as a massive pyramidal structure close at hand, now known as the D&M Pyramid. Their findings were quickly dismissed by NASA as an optical illusion. But after years of fruitless debate, a member of our team, Dr. Mark Carlotto, decided to use a state-of-the-art 3D computer modeling technique which now strongly indicates that the face could in fact be a real three-dimensional human-looking sculpture lying on the Martian surface. A sculpture 1,500 feet high and over a mile long. I and my colleagues have found a number of additional anomalous structures at Cydonia, and we have shown, using the most modern computer imaging processing available, that these Cydonia structures show clear evidence of being highly geometric.
In simple terms, advanced civilization creates things like buildings, cities, pyramids, that are inescapably composed of repeating geometric patterns. And the face on Mars, its nearby pyramids, the entire Cydonia complex is simply brimming with this elegant, repeating geometric structure.
The fundamental mathematical relationships communicated by the structures at Cydonia are now eerily replicated in the Giza complex here on Earth, including the very placement of the Sphinx. Even the key latitude of Giza, north of the equator, is now directly linked to the D&M Pyramid latitude at Cydonia on Mars. That in itself is now the single most striking statement of intelligence on Mars that we have found.
Hoagland and his team have gone even further. They've conducted detailed imaging analyses of the face on Mars. They compared it to the Sphinx and discovered that the two man-lion images, located millions of space miles apart, contain amazing visual and symbolic similarities.
Our team's thinking is that that face is our face, or what we once were. So in a sense, someday we may discover that we, in fact, were the Martians. That is why all of us are bringing so much pressure now to bear on NASA to specifically and exhaustively rephotograph the Cydonia complex on Mars. The thing that overwhelms me is the possibility that on some of those images of Cydonia, we will find conclusive proof of a connection between the monuments of Mars and the monuments of Earth as represented by the pyramids at Giza. If that's true, then obviously all our history, this dim inkling of who we are and how we have come to be on this small planet, will be changed.
The pyramids at Giza are truly a great mystery of the ages. Is it possible that they are a replication of the site at Cydonia on Mars? I mean, if there should prove to be a connection between the two, then who were the space-traveling builders? Is the city of Cairo related to Giza as the Face Pyramids complex is to Cydonia? Incidentally, Cairo is a Seleucid Arab word that means Mars. The dreadful prediction of death that shocked the nation was the beginning of the end revealed to one man 500 years ago. Nostradamus speaks to the ages when we return. The French Revolution had just broken out, and on that humid spring night in 1791, marauding bands of partisan rebels roamed the city of Salon. 3 of them decided to desecrate the 200-year-old grave of the famed visionary Nostradamus. The grave robbers were stunned. The brass plaque interred with Nostradamus correctly identified the date that his grave would be violated, 225 years after he was buried. An old legend said that whoever should drink from the prophet's skull would acquire his massive powers. But the legend also warned that whoever defiled the great man's bones would quickly be struck down dead. A chance shot, fired randomly from out of one of the prowling mobs, completed the prediction of the legend exactly. Who was this man, this oracle and prophet who prophesied hundreds of years into the future? He was born Michel de Notre Dame, but the world and the ages have come to know him better by his Latinized name, Nostradamus. Over 400 years ago, he wrote of air travel, submarines, royal and presidential assassinations, the French Revolution, both world wars, Hitler and Mussolini, and the crises we are about to face in this decade of the 90s. All these things could not possibly have been imagined in his own day. Is such foresight possible? And if so, how?
In tens of thousands of scientifically controlled tests, precognizance, the ability to see events before they happen, has never been successfully scientifically proven.
Yet evidence indicates that the phenomenon of clairvoyance has existed for thousands of years. Such great thinkers as Plato, St. Augustine, Kant, Spinoza, Newton, and Einstein had no doubt about the existence of clairvoyance.
9 will be set apart from the human flock, separated from judgment and counsel, their fate to be determined on departure. The unripe fruit will be the source of great scandal, great blame. To the other, great praise.
Nostradamus accurately predicted the Challenger shuttle disaster. He said it would be a fiery death and a celestial explosion raining debris into the ocean.
Nostradamus called each of his books centuries because the predictions contained within the quatrains were grouped in collections of 100. Each quatrain represented a forecast of some future event couched in brilliant word games and anagrams. There were 10 centuries in all, and their almost frightening accuracy has captured the world's imagination for over 450 years. From his early boyhood school years, Nostradamus habitually wrote down his visions. But people were being burned at the stake for less, and he wisely began scrambling his predictions in the form of poetic quatrains. He was passionate about all the sciences, but medicine was his first love. When the dreaded Black Plague struck France, the young doctor knew that he must leave his home and family, unknowing of what his own personal fortune might be, and plunge himself and his healing skills into the heart of the dread epidemic.
I told you, no more bleeding.
But that is what is always done.
You drain their strength with that foolishness. I want the sores lanced and then covered with the poultices.
That is a heathen Moorish cure.
I don't care where it comes from. It works. I've saved hundreds with this method.
You suggest we treat Christians with Arab medicine? What about their souls?
We are doctors. Let us save their bodies. Leave their souls to the priests.
I believe that with his medical knowledge, his knowledge of
information that he got from the Middle East and knowledge that he got from the future, he came up with modern hygienic techniques to fight the plague in his time.
Within 2 years, the wonder-working young doctor was perhaps the single most famous man in all of France. But his triumphant return home was marked with incredible and ironic tragedy. His wondrous visions had failed to provide Nostradamus with any kind of warning. The man who had saved thousands from the Black Death had returned too late to save his own family. Eventually, a new wife and family put the tragedy to rest, and he returned to his work once more.
The man had so many layers to his personality. He was a master astrologer, master psychic, and I also think that he astrally projected and actually physically spoke on the astral plane with people in our time.
The words of Nostradamus are not easy to grasp, but are the expertly extracted predictions about air travel, submarines, mechanized warfare, and the rise and fall of governments just lucky guesses? Still, Nostradamus appears to have taken great pains to make his visions difficult to understand. Why? Well, in a letter to his infant son, the great man himself gives us the answer.
My son, if I were to reveal what would happen in the future, the leaders of kingdoms, sects, religions, and faiths would find it little in accord with what their fancy would like to hear.
Michel de Nostradamus.
With the publication of his first quatrains, Nostradamus became the rage of the court. The Queen, Catherine de' Medici, was one of those who believed his predictions without reservation.
Forgive me, my lord, but I have seen the future, and you are in great danger.
No man can predict the future unless he practices witchcraft.
He has the gift. Listen. Please.
The young lion will overcome the old one on the battlefield in single combat. In a cage of gold, his eyes will be put out. 2 wounds, 1. Then to die a cruel death.
The old lion means you, does it not?
I speak the truth, my lord.
You must promise me to be careful. Promise me you won't ride in the tournament.
Enough! For my wife, I shall do as she requests. But I will not be ruled by this nonsense.
Nostradamus assured the Queen that dire predictions could be avoided with the king's word. But King Henry reneged on his promise 3 years later at the wedding celebration of his 2 sisters. As befitted special occasions, he was carrying his gilded ceremonial helmet, a cage of gold, when he insisted on a joust with the young Count de Montgomery. The dread prophecy of Nostradamus for King Henry was well known, and the young lion tried to beg off. But Henry, who loved rough sport, was royally insistent.
The young lion will overcome the old one on the battlefield in single combat. In a cage of gold, his eyes will be put out, 2 wounds, 1, then to die a cruel death.
Incredibly, Montgomery's lance splintered on the king's chest, making the 2 wounds in 1. One jagged splinter pierced the helmet's visor and stabbed through the king's eyes into his brain. Henry suffered horribly for 10 days before he died. A cruel death, indeed, fulfilling the prophecy to the letter. On the night of the king's death, an angry mob called upon the church inquisitors to burn Nostradamus at the stake. The wisdom of concealing the true meaning of his predictions was now clear.
The enemies of Nostradamus accused him of witchcraft, but lacking the skill to interpret his quatrains, their efforts were in vain.
But Nostradamus often bewildered his own family as well, as in the time he stopped in the street to pay homage to a poor young monk.
Father, you make us look like fools.
And why is that?
Because Brother Peretti is a monk of low birth, only lately delivered from a pigsty.
My son, it is required that you yield and bend the knee before His Holiness, the Pope. Come on.
The son's confusion at his father's answer was made clear 40 years later. Cesar lived to see Brother Peretti, the lowly-born swineherder, become Pope Sixtus V, 19 years after the death of his father. In the 1500s, the volcanic French Revolution, still some 200 years into the future, would have been beyond imagination. Yet the experts tell us Nostradamus wrote of this horrendous time with clear and uncanny accuracy.
By night through the forest of Rennes, two partners by a roundabout route. The monk king dressed in gray at Varennes. The elected Capet causes tempest, fire, and bloody slicing.
Now here we have a marvelous opportunity to examine the prediction line by line. Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, two partners, escaped from the castle in Paris through a secret door. Their flight to Varennes took them through the forest of Reims, but they lost their way, just as the quatrain predicted. They had to take a roundabout route. The king, as a disguise, wore a plain gray monk's cloak, but it gets even more astonishing. Louis XVI was a Capet, the first elected king of France, just as the last line of the quatrain states. He was both the cause and the victim of the tempest. And certainly no one can doubt the connection between the words bloody slicing and the guillotine. Louis and his queen, Marie Antoinette, were both decapitated by this grisly device.
To the people of Nostradamus' time, years before the events would happen, it must have seemed like pure gibberish. I mean, who could have imagined an elected king, let alone entertain the idea of both the king and his queen being guillotined? The rise of Napoleon and Hitler, tanks, submarines, and the Great Wars predicted. Can the apocalyptic nuclear destruction of the world be avoided? The future out of the past when we come back. Many Nostradamus experts are agreed he was often touched by spells of melancholy, especially when troubled by visions of his beloved France 200 years in the future, being desolated by the cruel and bloody ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte.
An emperor will be born near Italy, one who will cost his empire dearly. They will say that with such people as rally round him, he will be found less prince than butcher.
Napoleon was born not in France, but on Corsica, an island near Italy. His dreams of conquest nearly bled France to death, literally and financially. And the people around him cursed his wars of slaughter, from the Straits of Dover to the tip of the Italian boot, from the ancient sands of Egypt to the iron gates of Moscow. He was certainly regarded as more of a butcher than of a prince.
Nostradamus' researchers agree that around 12 of the quatrains throughout 5 of the centuries relate specifically to Napoleon.
Nostradamus' predictions are nothing more than fortune-telling based on generalities and probabilities. For instance, someone named Mary will become Queen of England. Now, these are not really fortune-tellings. It's only a statement of generality and probability that will eventually, I'm sure, come true.
Fortune-telling, generalities, simple statements of probability. Yet Nostradamus seems to foretell names into modern history with apparent ease. Consider his comments about the Spanish Civil War of 1936.
From Castile, Franco will bring out the assembly. The ambassadors will not agree and cause a schism.
The experts point out that Nostradamus here actually named Generalissimo Francisco Franco, who rose suddenly at the head of the fascist movement in Spain. And, exactly as predicted, the world powers were thrown into a great schism. Germany and Italy backed Franco, France, England, and the US withheld recognition, and Stalin openly supported his opposition.
The people of the Riviera will be in the crowd. The great man will be denied entrance to the Gulf.
The second name in this remarkable quatrain is Riviera. Rivera, the Spanish dictator, was Franco's mentor before he died. Later, Rivera's own son and most of Rivera's crowd became ardent Franco supporters. While in veritable exile, Franco gained control of the army in Morocco, but the Spanish Navy remained loyal to Madrid, effectively cutting him off from his power base in southern Spain, denying him access to the Gulf of Cadiz, just as Nostradamus had said. Even the most stubborn of skeptics has been impressed with Nostradamus' use of proper names in prophecies. Most experts point out that Louis Pasteur, the great father of microbiology, was also, unarguably, named by Nostradamus nearly 400 years before he made his spectacular medical discoveries.
The lost thing is discovered. Pasteur will be celebrated almost as a god.
Pasteur's discoveries did border on the miraculous, and, as the quatrain says, he was celebrated almost as a god. Actually, there was a heady movement among French Catholics to have Pasteur nominated for sainthood while he was still alive.
This when the moon completes her great cycle.
In 1885, when Louis Pasteur was finally recognized and admitted to the French Academy, there was a total eclipse of the moon.
But he will be dishonored by other rumors.
This, too, is incredibly accurate. Some of Pasteur's lesser and envious colleagues rumored that his remarkable discoveries were really the works of others, rumors that saddened and dogged Pasteur for the rest of his life. We are told Nostradamus is never more sadly accurate as when his predictions are of war and its terrible machinery of destruction, nor so chillingly accurate as when he actually names such satanic warmongers as Adolf Hitler.
Perhaps the single most impressive group of his modern predictions are those about Hitler and the Second World War. There are 20 quadrants that unmistakably refer to Adolf Hitler, 3 in which he is mentioned by the name Hister.
From the deepest part of Western Europe, a child will be born of a poor family who will entice many with his oratory. His reputation will grow even greater in the kingdom of the East.
Hitler was born in the Austrian Alps, the deepest part of Western Europe. His father had a low-level civil service job and could barely make ends meet. And Hitler absolutely enticed the many with his spellbinding oratory. And in the kingdom of the East, the USSR, Stalin considered Hitler his greatest single threat long before the rest of the world started taking the German dictator seriously. In some 40 of the quatrains, the experts demonstrate that Nostradamus clearly foresaw air-to-air combat, the bombing of great cities, the Wolf-Pack submarines, and even the people of London sheltering in the subways during the Blitz V-2 rocket assaults. He did not name Mussolini, but he did say that his name was lowly. Mussolini means muslin maker, a craft regarded by Italian tradesmen as the lowest of the low. In Century 1, Quatrain 63, Nostradamus writes, "The scourge is past, the world shrinks. For a long time, peace and populated lands. People travel safely by air, land, sea, and wave. Then wars stirred up anew." That does seem to describe the post-World War II era.
I think the quatrains predicting the assassination of John F. and Robert Kennedy are the most impressive.
Listen carefully to these words, written almost 500 years before the events happened.
The great man will be struck down in the daytime by a thunderbolt, an evil deed foretold by the bearer of a petition. Another is struck at night.
What other way would a 16th century man have to describe the striking force of a modern high-powered rifle? Jeane Dixon not only warned JFK, she sent a plea that he avoid going to Texas. Robert Kennedy indeed was struck at night. And in Century 6, Quatrain 37, Nostradamus asserts that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the assassin of JFK. Quote,
"Dead, they will accuse an innocent one of the deed."
The experts tell us Nostradamus also makes very positive and hopeful predictions.
One day, the great powers will be friends. Their power will be seen to increase. The new land will be at the height of its power.
In his prophecies, Nostradamus frequently referred to America as the New Land. Many experts also believe numerous quatrains were numbered to correspond with the year of the predicted event. This particular quatrain is number 89, and it was indeed 1989 when the United States and what was the USSR began to be seen as friends. But the next quatrain has a somber warning.
Many people will want to come to terms with the great world leaders, leaders who will bring war down upon them. The political leaders will not want to hear anything of their message.
Doesn't this have the sad, familiar ring of Bosnia, Afghanistan, the Balkans, the Middle East? Many researchers believe that up to 2/3 of Nostradamus' quatrains have been fulfilled to date. Among Nostradamus' unfulfilled quatrains, he talks about a great Third World War, possibly even the end of the world.
The two will not remain allied for long. Within 13 years, they surrender to Berber and Persian leaders.
Barbary was the term the ancient Greeks used for their Asian neighbors in the Middle East. Persia is, of course, the former name of Iran. Consequently, we are told this verse predicts a falling out of the Russian and American blocs over some new Israeli-Arab confrontation, awaiting only the right spark to set off the final nuclear war.
Some 200 of these prophecies that remain to be fulfilled concern the rise of the Antichrist in the Middle East, which will occur at the time of a Chinese-Mongolian invasion of the West. One of the countries that will join this invasion is Persia, modern-day Iran.
When weapons and plans are enclosed in a fish in 1996, out of it then will come a man who will make war. His fleet will have traveled far across the sea to appear at the Italian shores.
Not too many years ago, the idea of launching a nuclear attack from submarines would have sounded like science fiction. Today, it's an all too horrifying reality. The superpower nations now have the capability of destroying this planet entirely in a few incredibly destructive hours. Dire predictions indeed, but Nostradamus himself said the predictions were based on conditions that could be altered, as he suggested to King Henry. Armed with his predictions for our future, world leaders have the time and knowledge to avoid Nostradamus' foretold catastrophes. As the 21st century approaches, we must steer a course around potential disasters and bring humanity to a new world of peace.
I think that the problem with Nostradamus, for many people, is that they don't take responsibility for their lives because basically they're saying it's all predicted. If your name's on the bullet, then you're going to die.
I believe that Nostradamus was highly skilled in prophecy and future seeing, but we all possess these abilities. We just have to learn to develop them ourselves.
Nostradamus is adamant about stating that we can always change our future by changing the way we think, by changing the way we behave, and especially by the way we act towards others.
At first reading, there seems to be a rather large conflict of opinion between the quatrains predicting our future.
Humane realm and angelic offspring causes lasting peace and unity. War subdues under its control. Peace is maintained.
The experts find no problem with these opposed verses. They tell us that these totally different views of our future prove that we are not locked into some sort of dire predestiny. Rather, it is as if we're arriving at a fork in the road. The way we take is up to us. It is true that Nostradamus has predicted both a horrendous future and a future of incredible bliss. The legacy of his quatrain seems to be, if you choose the evil road, so shall your future be evil. Or, choosing the good road leads to a beautiful future for now and for generations to come. Was Nostradamus really a great and true prophet? Could he see his own future? In the year 1566, on the evening of June 30th, Nostradamus retired to his beloved study. There he included the large royal gift of money in the estate his wife and children would inherit. Aching and bone-weary, he suddenly felt a glow of peace and tranquility like he had never known before come over him. and he recognized the shadow that was approaching.
On his return from the embassy, the king's gift put in place, he will do nothing more. He will be gone to God. Close relatives, friends, brothers by blood will find him completely dead near the bed and the bench.
The following morning, his assistant led family and friends cautiously up the stairs. There they found Nostradamus dead, a prophet to the very last. Scores of people have disappeared without a trace, a ghostly energy force or a window into another world. The Bermuda Triangle when we come back to explore this baffling mystery. The Bermuda Triangle is a modern name for a very old and perhaps very sinister mystery. We know for a fact that occurrences were already at work in the year 1492 in this now infamous part of the Atlantic Ocean. From old Spanish Admiralty records, we know what Columbus wrote. Undoubtedly, he and his crews encountered some weird and frightening phenomena in the skies and the sea of the strange new world they were approaching. Columbus didn't record what the already nervous sailors thought. Maybe they believed they had truly sailed into the Devil's Sea, as they had been warned about back home. But we do know that Columbus had no explanation for the strange encounters. And equally, we know these same eerie phenomena are still with us today, in the pre-dawn of the 21st century. For hundreds of years, ships, planes, and men have vanished in this part of the Atlantic Ocean. Since 1945 alone, there have been dozens of vanishings, from huge naval vessels to private boats, from commercial airliners to small planes, not to mention the staggering number of people aboard these crafts. They have simply disappeared within this wedge of ocean without leaving a single trace. But are these disappearances the result of some sinister and unknowable force? Or are they simply tragic but quite understandable catastrophes?
In virtually every case in the Bermuda Triangle, there has been a storm. What has really vanished in the Bermuda Triangle have been these accounts of the storms that people neglect to mention in order to have a mystery.
This is the entry point to the Bermuda Triangle. Although it has wonderful weather the vast majority of the time, this area is susceptible to sudden squall lines that are completely unpredictable. It can get very dangerous very quickly.
There can be no doubt that weather plays an important part in both sea and air losses in the Bermuda Triangle. But can it be blamed for the large number of mysterious disappearances? Well, as we shall see, there are many other odd occurrences on record that have nothing at all to do with weather. Charles Berlitz, the noted author and linguist, wrote about one of the earliest incidents in his excellent book.
From the log of His Majesty's ship, Narwhal, for a fortnight we have been becalmed in the midst
mysterious Sargasso Sea, and the patience of men and officers alike are sorely tried. We seem to be caught in the grasp of some strange force that will not let us go. Though we have not had a whisper of a breeze for days, oddly, there is the strange sound of wind about us.
The approaching ship was recognized as the Westbury Star out of Liverpool. There was no appearance of life on board. The frigate captain tried signaling and calling, but there was no answer. The log continues with this contradictory comment.
Though there was not a living soul on deck, the sails were neatly trimmed, and the Westbury Star was tacking to a brisk wind as she passed by. But, upon my honor, there was not the slightest breeze to ripple our own rigging.
Is it possible that the wind would permit the ghost ship to tack by with bellied sails, while 100 yards away there was not the slightest breeze? It is, of course, happenings like these that give the Bermuda Triangle its eerie reputation.
The American schooner Ellen Austin was bound for Spanish and Portuguese ports in the early fall of 1881, when the ship's crew was surprised by the sudden appearance of another ship off the port beam. They called the captain, and when he joined them, they hailed the vessel and scanned the decks. Getting no answer, they put over a boarding party. found the rigging intact and the ship seaworthy. Everything seemed normal, except there was not a living soul aboard. A salvage or prize crew was left aboard while the others made their way back to the Ellen Austin. But before they could set sail, a violent squall bore down on them without warning. The fury of the storm blew itself out in less than half an hour. The prize derelict, along with the salvage crew, was gone. It had completely disappeared. Both the officers and men of the Ellen Austin would later testify that it was as if it had vanished into thin air.
The disappearance of huge ships, private and commercial aircraft, people and pleasure boats in recent times alone is staggering. Perhaps we might find a clue in the strange story Charles Berlitz tells us, exactly as it was related to him by Captain Don Henry.
We were coming back from Puerto Rico on the good news, with a tow of 2,500 ton on 1,000 feet of 4-inch hawser. Beautiful weather. You wouldn't want for a nicer day anywhere. I was enjoying some downtime in my cabin when the electric started acting up. We checked the whole system. Generators, breakers, shunts, just fine. Nothing wrong below. But topside, there weren't anything right. There was a funny-looking fog, I guess you'd call it, kind of oozing all over the barge. I figured I'd better take another good look inside. And that's just about when that blow smacked into us. Years at sea, I never saw the likes of that squall. It come out of nowhere. All our instruments were going crazy. Compass, radio, radar, engine monitors, absolutely berserk. At first, we was just worried about losing the tow. But then we started getting worried about our own skins. We were redlined at 850. Big twin 2,000 horse EMV diesels churning up green water, and we couldn't make a foot of headway. Something had a hold of us and wouldn't let go. Then just like that, the squall was over. We set the automatic pilot to go check damage, and we hadn't lost no rigging or deck gear. But then what I saw gave me goosebumps all over. A half-ton of hawser stiff-stretched after the fantail, and not a thing connected to the bitter end. When we got her hauled in, you could see there wasn't no eye-splice, and the line wasn't raggedy like it had parted. No, sir. Looked like it had been whacked off with a fire axe. Next time I looked up, the weird foggy stuff was disappeared. But after the barge, the sea was still churning, and just in that one spot. The sun was out just like before, and there was a bone-aching chill in the air. Yet the rails and fittings were hot enough to give you a smart burn. We had a narrow escape from whatever took hold of us out there. And it made one righteous believer out of me.
There was another interesting result of Captain Don Henry's encounter with the Bermuda Triangle. When he got back to port, he had to throw away every battery on the tug. They were all dead, completely drained. Oh, there are many similar seagoing stories. However, some of the most remarkable mysteries are about aircraft, large and small, military, commercial, and private. Let's start with one that has a happy ending. Commercial pilot Chuck Wakely's story, as related to us by Charles Berlitz.
There is definitely something you can't explain that occurs in this area, and it is definitely electromagnetic in nature. A few years back, Chuck Wakely was piloting for Sunline Aviation in Miami.
I just dropped a charter in Nassau and was on my way back. It was a beautiful night, moon rising, stars everywhere. Then, just over Andros Island, something peculiar began to happen. The wings of my aircraft began to glow with a strange light. I thought at first it was some kind of effect from the instrument lights, but then the whole aircraft began to glow, inside and out. My instruments started malfunctioning so bad I thought they were gonna bust apart. By then, the aircraft was glowing so intensely I couldn't see the horizon at all, or even the moon and the stars. I wasn't panicked, but I certainly wasn't all that laid back either. Then, bingo, the glow was gone and everything was right normal again. These things have happened to a lot of us professional pilots. Though for obvious reasons, they aren't things we like to talk about. But there's darn few of us who don't believe that there is something out there.
A modern jetliner encounters a fourth-dimensional time warp. And what really happened to the mysterious Flight 19 48 years ago. We'll be right back with some recent and startling news. Miami International, one of the busiest airports in the world, has its share of strange stories to tell. Remember, you're dealing here with highly experienced pilots and the world's most advanced technical equipment.
The Triangle has a long history of what we like to call time warp incidents, unexplained occurrences in which time just doesn't want to behave itself.
According to author Charles Berlitz, the strange story of the National Airlines 727 passenger plane began as it neared the outer approach corridor to Miami International Airport.
The Miami Tower was called for a time check. The instrument panel clock was right on. They were 20 minutes out and right on schedule. Later, the co-pilot would remember seeing a strange green mist that enveloped the aircraft, but otherwise everything was completely normal.
Never seen anything like
But in the Miami Tower, the air traffic controller was jolted when the blip of the approaching Flight 727 suddenly vanished from the radar screen.
I've just lost Flight 727.
The controller immediately went into emergency priority status. Within minutes, the Coast Guard Search and Rescue Squadron was in action, and the Miami airport prepared for the worst.
Is broken.
When the flight attendant checked for any last-minute instructions, she couldn't believe she had completed her usual 10 to 12-minute cabin duties in less than 3 minutes. And the co-pilot was surprised to discover the greenish mist that enveloped the aircraft since the time check was gone, not only from about the aircraft, but from the sky itself. Precisely 10 minutes from the time Flight 727 had vanished from the radar screen, it just as suddenly and mysteriously reappeared. The complex equipment was in perfect working order, as the ongoing computer and manual scans verified. Flight 727 landed without incident, with the crew understandably curious about the emergency equipment along the runway. And they were all incredulous when told that their arrival was 10 minutes late, despite the fact that the instrument panel clock synchronized exactly with the earlier tower time check. It was now, along with every one of the crew's watches, 10 minutes slow.
Some experts, noting that our planet operates on electromagnetism, have wondered if the Bermuda Triangle and certain other areas might create vortices where material objects can drop into or out of another space-time continuum.
Personally, I'm not at all fascinated with the concept of the Bermuda Triangle. Here in Miami, it's not even a part of the culture. We have far more important things to worry about, like hurricanes, things that, frankly, are not figments of anyone's imagination.
But can we believe that it is the unique weather pattern in the South Atlantic Ocean that is responsible for all the phenomena in the Bermuda Triangle?
The strange goings-on in the Devil's Triangle are not exclusive to the Devil's Triangle. There's also an area off of the east coast of Japan called the Devil's Sea. If you went in the center of the Devil's Triangle and you bored a hole through the center of the Earth, you would come out in the center of the Devil's Sea. And the Devil's Sea and the Devil's Triangle are the only two places on Earth where the compass points to the true north, not the magnetic north.
Einstein had a theory that the Bermuda Triangle was a corridor, an interdimensional doorway to another world.
Some experts believe a corridor between dimensions might very well explain the mysterious time warp phenomena that so many flyers have encountered. Which brings us to perhaps the most famous of the unsolved mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle.
It began routinely enough on December 5th, 1945. An advanced training flight was scheduled for takeoff at 1400 hours. 5 pilots and 10 crew members were scheduled to go up. Ironically, their course was to be a simple triangle with an expected flight time of 2 hours. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced combat pilot with over 2,500 hours of flying time. Flight 19 had completed the first leg of the flight plan and turned north. Suddenly, all of the aircraft began experiencing problems with their instruments.
This is Foxtrot 28, calling Foxtrot 36. My instruments have gone crazy.
My instruments are malfunctioning too. Where are we?
Some 40 miles away, Lieutenant Robert Cox, a training instructor, picked up their transmissions, but for some reason they couldn't hear him. Cox called the base station in Fort Lauderdale, which had lost contact with Flight 19, and immediately emergency procedures went into effect. Base operations continued to receive Lieutenant Cox's transmissions, which told them Flight 19 was lost and disoriented, but they could not get through to Taylor or any of his pilots. Ham radio operators up and down the coast were also tuned into the lost flight and monitored their frequency. Then, as night fell, one of them caught the last words to ever be heard from Flight 19.
Don't come after us! They look like...
Even as the last words were being transmitted, a huge search and rescue mission was launched. A big Martin Mariner with a crew of 13 suddenly disappeared from radar, and, like Flight 19, was never heard from again. The greatest search effort in the history of the Navy was now underway. Thousands of square miles of ocean were scoured, but it all came to nothing. In the end, Flight 19 and the Martin Mariner, 28 men in all, disappeared without a trace, as if they had passed through some window into another dimension.
Incredible as it seems, 5 skilled combat pilots on a 2-hour training mission somehow got lost and were never heard from again. For over 40 years, the story has ended there, locked deep in the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. Until now. On May 8, 1991, the research vessel Deep Sea was 10 miles off the coast of Fort Lauderdale. The instrumentation locked on a find, and the computer generated an outline of an airplane on the seabed 750 feet below. The distinctive rear gun turret marked the plane as a Navy Avenger. 200 yards away, the sonar began picking up a second plane, and a third. All Avengers. Over the next 24 hours, the crew spotted 5 in all, lying within a 1-mile radius. The national news media concluded that one of our greatest aviation mysteries was quite possibly solved. Newsweek and People magazine reported that the wreckage on the sea bottom might be the remains of long-lost Flight 19. But the location is less than 10 miles off Fort Lauderdale, whose city lights are quite visible from the deck of a modern cruise boat and far easier from the cockpits of 5 fighter aircraft. In fact, the Deep Sea's underwater camera identified the letters FT on the fuselage from one of the sunken planes, which is the designation for the Fort Lauderdale base. The planes have not been found, according to Richard Weiner and Charles Berlitz. They only found Avengers, which were dumped after the war. Even though 139 Avengers were lost or dumped off the Florida coast during and after the war years, the news report strongly suggested the mystery of Flight 19 had been solved. But was it? Whatever they are, the anomalies of the Bermuda Triangle apparently exist and are still swallowing up lives and property, which seems to demand some new thinking on the causes and nature of these strange events.
There are a lot of mysterious things that happen on this planet, things that don't necessarily fit into the little box we draw around the universe and label it Newtonian physics.
One of the favorite theories among scholars and intellectuals of the 17th and 18th centuries was the concept of dual civilizations, that one life form came out of the sea to become man, and another remained in the sea to become a separate race. These waters may be the gateway between our world above and theirs below.
There is a long, long history of strange phenomena in the Bermuda Triangle. Scores of paranormal incidents and unexplained disappearances in modern times alone. That these disappearances have happened and continue to happen are now beyond challenge. The question no longer is, did they happen, but why?
People are fascinated with the Bermuda Triangle, have been for years because they can't explain it.
I don't think we'll ever know about it until we have submersible vehicles capable of scouring the ocean bottom in its entirety, and then it may have a simple explanation, or on the other hand, it may be something beyond all comprehension, something we won't want to believe.
At this very moment, there are numerous international research projects being conducted in this section of the Atlantic. Indeed, the 90s may be the time we discover the answers to the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. The Shroud of Turin, an incredible relic or an unparalleled fraud? And the truth behind the famous 1898 photograph that stunned the world after these messages. This mystery is unquestionably the most sensitive, controversial, and emotional enigma in the world today. The Shroud of Turin. Is it the burial cloth that covered Jesus Christ when his crucified body was laid in the tomb? And if it is not, then what is it? The modern investigation and controversy over the shroud began in 1898. A gifted amateur Italian photographer, Secondo Pia, was allowed unprecedented permission by the King of Italy to take the first photograph of the shroud. When it was spread out for display, Pia was disappointed on seeing that the image on the cloth was extremely faint. But what he caught on his two glass photographic plates stunned the world. It showed that the image on the cloth itself was photographically negative. Consequently, the faint, almost ghost-like images on the shroud appeared in reverse on his camera plates, making them a positive image. It was the first time in history that the likeness could be seen in full, majestic detail.
It measures 14 feet 3 inches long by 3 feet 7 inches wide, which includes a hand-sewn seam added at an unknown date. These full-length dark lines are scorches from the fire that nearly destroyed it in 1532. The diamond-shaped patches cover holes resulting from that fire.
On both sides of the shroud, we see markings of a vicious flogging from the neck to the calves of the legs. There appear to be markings of wounds that would indicate the man had something with many sharp points pressed onto his head. On the back view, we see shoulders that are badly bruised, as though from carrying something heavy. Nail wounds through the wrists and feet, a distension of the thorax, all of which would seem to indicate death by crucifixion, exactly as the Gospels describe the suffering and death of the man Jesus.
For at least 6 centuries, millions of people have continued to believe that this is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Several scholarly studies have also given support to this belief.
Some of the best scientists in the world have observed this image, measured, studied it, and still have no explanation for how the image was formed.
What could, from a dead body, in rigor mortis, in a cloth, create such an image?
I feel that the radiation that made the image was a direct result of the resurrection.
It's basically some form of natural phenomenon, or some people might say supernatural phenomenon.
However, there is some academic opinion which insists this cloth is nothing more than an elaborate medieval fraud.
It is an absolute fact that the shroud is a painting, period. When I started working on it, I expected it to be real. I was hoping it would be real. I can't argue, however, with the microscope.
Skeptics argue there is no provenance, no historical trail tracing the shroud prior to 1353. Some 1,300 years between the time it was supposed to be wrapped around Christ's body and its appearance in the church at Liry, France. Where was it all those years? Did it even exist during that period?
Skeptics are completely wrong in insisting that the trail of the shroud goes back only to the middle 1300s. It does, in fact, go back to the Bible itself. The 20th chapter of the Gospel of John, verse 6, states that when Peter entered the tomb of Jesus on Sunday morning, he found the shroud. Now, normally a grave cloth would be considered unclean and not saved. But if it bore the image of the body it had contained, this would explain why it was retrieved by Jesus' followers and treated with great reverence. In fact, a 4th century Syriac manuscript tells us the king of Edessa, a man called Abgar, was cured of leprosy when he received a cloth from a disciple named Jude Thaddeus that had upon it the image of Jesus' face. Probably for disguising the burial cloth, the shroud was placed in a specially made container with gold latticework. And when folded upon itself 4 times, only the image of the head would be seen. And again, for the sake of protection, the caretakers of the shroud did one other thing. They began to refer to it as the mandylion, a Greek term meaning simply towel.
The creation of the mandylion is a most important event. Up to the time of its exhibition in Edessa, 300 years after the crucifixion, there were no realistic pictorial representations of Jesus Christ. With the appearance of the Mandylion, the pictorial concept of Christ changed drastically from a beardless youth, like the Greek god Apollo, to what has become the universally accepted version today. There is no doubt amongst experts that what is known as the Mandylion of Edessa was a prototype for all the pictorializations of Christ from that day to this.
The shroud, or Mandylion as it was now called, was apparently lost and forgotten until a flood devastated the city of Edessa. It was rediscovered in a niche above the city's west wall. It was returned to a place of veneration where it remained until 944. The Byzantine emperor sent an army to bring it to Constantinople. We know from Byzantine records that a great celebration and parade accompanied its entry to Constantinople on August the 15th, 944 AD, and it was once again revered as the true and miraculous image of Christ.
In 1204, European knights of the Fourth Crusade stormed and sacked the Christian city of Constantinople.
Dr. Scavone goes on to say, a French knight, Robert de Clary, wrote that he had seen the shroud with the figure of Christ on it, but that after the city fell, the shroud mysteriously disappeared. Many experts believe that the shroud was carried off in secret by the powerful Knights Templars. Then later, when the French king viciously crushed the order of the Templars, one royal knight, Geoffrey de Charnay, took the shroud into hiding in his own castle. And all the Knight Templar martyrs died without revealing the secret.
However, two recently discovered documents state that the shroud was carried to Athens in 1205 by a prominent knight of the Fourth Crusade, Othon de la Roche. Then in about 1353, a distant descendant of Othon, Jean de Vergy, married Geoffrey de Charny, the first certain owner of the shroud at Lire. A pilgrim's medallion from about 1356 shows the family crests of Vergy and Charny side by side below the twin image of the shroud, and this suggests an equality of ownership between them.
Geoffrey de Charny endowed the collegiate church at Lire and gave into its keeping the artifact we now call the shroud. 60 years later, the de Charnys reclaimed the shroud, and for another 34 years, Marguerite de Charnay's granddaughter refused to return it to the church, even under the threat of excommunication. Finally, and probably for financial reasons, Marguerite transferred ownership of the shroud in 1452 to the royal family of Italy, the Savoys. In 1532, fire in the Savoy Cathedral at Chambéry in France damaged the shroud. In 1578, the Savoys established their capital in the city of Turin and took the shroud with them where it remains till this day. After 1580, the shroud was rarely exhibited to the public, and then only for short periods, some 11 times in 400 years.
Some of the most critical opinions regarding the shroud's authenticity, both past and present, have come from Christian churchmen, beginning with a French bishop in the medieval year of 1389. Catholic Bishop Pierre Darcy was disturbed to hear that the shroud was being exhibited at the collegiate church at Lire as a true relic.
Diligent inquiry and examination by my predecessor, Bishop Henri de Poitiers, discovered out the fraud. The reputed relic was nothing but a piece of common cloth, cunningly painted. Bishop de Poitiers had a full confession from the culprit painter himself, for which he immediately ordered a withdrawal of the false relic from public viewing.
The reputed Bishop Darcy letter has never been proved genuine. None of the copies of the Darcy letter that we have is signed or dated. There's also no proof that the Pope ever saw it or that it was even delivered to him. And besides, no trace or hint of identity has ever been found of the artist, who, if he ever made the image on the shroud, would have belonged among the ranks of Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Raphael.
The image on the Shroud of Turin is negative, meaning that the lights and darks are reversed from the way we would normally see with our eyes. Assuming that the shroud were manufactured in the 14th century, it would mean someone would had to have conceived of the concept of photography approximately 650 years before it was invented. I don't think so.
If the shroud is a fake, it is probably the most astonishing fake of all time. If it is genuine, then it is arguably the first visible evidence of Christ's crucifixion and may literally be a photographic record of his resurrection.
In 1973, the shroud was brought out for a brief examination by a group of European scientists. Among them was the late Dr. Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist and one of the leading experts in dust and pollen analysis in the world. Dr. Frey almost single-handedly developed a technique to determine where criminals had been by testing samples of dust and pollen from their clothing. At first, Dr. Frey's objective was simple. If the shroud was forged in France in the 14th century, then only the French or Italian pollens would be found in the cloth. But his exhaustive analysis found some 58 specific pollens, only 17 of which were indigenous to Europe. The rest were from Palestine and southern Turkey, the site of Edessa and Constantinople. And this meant that the shroud had been in these places at some time in its history. It has been alleged that the type of linen, the herringbone pattern weave, was very rare in the Palestine area, but that it was a very common textile after the 12th century in Europe. This is simply not true. Neither the linen nor the weave were common in Europe. This same pattern is identical to mummy wrappings that go back as far as 2000 BC. Joseph of Arimathea was a wealthy man who received permission from Pilate to bury Christ's body. It is not unlikely that when he gave his tomb for the burial of Christ, he may have also used expensive Middle Eastern linen grave clothes that were intended for his own burial.
The physical shroud itself is one matter for investigation, but even more mysterious and more puzzling is the haunting image which appears on the shroud itself. Next, the startling discoveries of a famous forensic pathologist are revealed, and what new role is 20th century technology playing in the historical drama of the Shroud of Turin. This and more when we come back. The shroud may be traceable to the time of Christ, but is it an image of Christ or a painting by a very clever artist, as first claimed by Bishop Darcy and several modern-day scholars?
If it was the shroud of Christ, it would have to be made up of embalming materials and blood and other body fluids. What we found microscopically were pigments, pigments used by an artist, and a paint medium that was commonly used in the Middle Ages. This proves the shroud is a painting, a beautiful painting, but nevertheless the work of an artist.
I don't believe the theory because there is so little pigment shown in the image areas on the shroud, and the image itself only consists of degraded cellulose fibrils, which have a yellowish color as viewed by the human eye.
The True Relic experts totally disagree. They contend that the molecular paint traces found even in the unimaged shroud areas are simply dust particulates acquired over the years. Equally, they argue the unique effect on the fibril surfaces cannot be produced by any known paint, and far more resemble a radiation burn than any kind of intentional coloration.
The shroud is definitely not a fake or a fraud. Many of today's most distinguished scientists are convinced the shroud is genuine.
Many people have sent me images to compare to the shroud. The VP8 analyzer can clearly distinguish a man-made picture from the real shroud image. The slope of a man-made picture is uniform, and it rises to a fixed plateau.
From supermarket art to the world's masterpieces, no painting possesses true three-dimensional qualities, and the VP8 analyzer clearly proves it.
The slope of the image on the shroud is varied and agrees with the shape of a real face. We found that in the shroud's image, there's encoded three-dimensional information, which an artist could not have put there.
A particularly sensitive point of discussion with scientists on both sides of the issue centers around what appear to be blood stains. The question is, are the stains actually blood? And if they are, how did they get there?
According to medical physicist Dr. John Heller and blood specialist Dr. Alan Adler, when paint is x-rayed, it shows up quite unequivocally. But these x-rays of the shroud do not show the blood spots, which means that the blood could not be paint. They determined not only that the markings on the shroud were indeed blood, but blood highly loaded with bilirubin, a bile pigment that would only show up if the dead man had been jaundiced or severely and traumatically beaten.
On the other side of the ocean, and working independently of Heller and Adler, the noted pathologist Pierre Bamballon came to the further conclusion that the blood spots on the shroud were human and of the type AB. But even if it has been scientifically proven that the image is not a forgery and that the blood is indeed real, what proof is there that this linen cloth is the burial shroud of Jesus Christ? Could a modern forensic pathologist be able to tell anything from an examination of the shroud? Dr. Robert Buckland is a former coroner and forensic pathologist of Los Angeles County. He is well acquainted with images of violent death.
This is the body of a 5-foot, 11-inch Caucasian male weighing about 170 pounds. On the head, there are blood flows resulting from numerous puncture wounds on the front, the back, and the top of the head. There's a swelling over one cheek consistent with a beating. The right wrist is covered by the left hand, but there is a puncture wound in the left wrist consistent with a crucifixion injury. The classical, artistic, and legendary portrayal of nails through the palms is incorrect because the structures in the hand are too fragile to hold up the weight of a man of this size without tearing free. There are streams of blood running down both forearms, originating in the wrist areas and controlled by gravity, so the blood flows toward the elbows with the arms elevated and outstretched. On the back, there are more than 100 lesions which appear to be scourge or whip marks. Historians have indicated that the Romans used a whip called a flagrum. This implement had 2 or 3 thongs, and at their ends were pieces of metal or bone which looked like small dumbbells. Here you can see how those end pieces from a Roman flagrum fit precisely into the scourge lesions on the body. Here on the front of the body is a large blood stain resulting from puncture of the chest by an instrument like a lance or a spear. This weapon penetrated the thoracic cavity through the pleural spaces and into the heart. Later, after the corpse was removed from the cross and turned, blood dribbled out of the chest wound and puddled along the small of the back. There's an abrasion on one knee consistent with a fall. Finally, a spike has been driven through both feet and blood leaked from those areas and has stained the cloth. The evidence of a scourged man who was crucified and who died of postural asphyxia and cardiopulmonary failure is clear-cut.
The coroner's report fits every recorded detail in the Bible account regarding the beating of Christ by the Romans. It matches perfectly with everything we know from the Bible about the death of Jesus Christ.
Impressive evidence indeed that the shroud could be the actual burial cloth of Christ. Even more evidence favoring the shroud's authenticity was forthcoming. In 1978, when the Shroud of Turin was exhibited for only the 4th time in the century, a team of 40 scientists known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project, using the latest high-tech equipment, examined the shroud for 5 intensive days. During the next 7 years, this tireless group spent 150,000 man-hours studying, testing, and interpreting the data from the shroud, making it the most intensively studied artifact in history. But the shroud advocates received a serious setback when one test, a carbon-14 dating analysis, produced disappointing results. An international news agency report stated that a test performed by scientists in 3 countries indicated that the shroud dated from the Middle Ages, somewhere between the years 1260 and 1390.
The radiocarbon dates that we obtained clearly put the shroud in the Middle Ages.
Carbon-14 is never used as a sole litmus test, and yet the mood of the day seemed to accept the dating without question, and the press leaped to unwarranted conclusions.
Carbon-14 dating is far from an exact science. Freshly killed mollusks show they have been dead for 3,000 years, while bristlecone pine, the oldest trees on Earth, always date too young by 2,000 to 3,000 years.
They really only tested one area. As one guy put it, they didn't do 3 tests. They did 1 test 3 times.
There are literally thousands of pieces of scientific data which support the conclusion that the shroud is not a fake or forgery. However, only one piece of evidence, the carbon-14 dating, indicates the shroud is of medieval origin. In my professional opinion, the authenticity of the shroud could be proven in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt.
Of the extensive objective scientific tests performed on the shroud, the preponderance favored authenticity. Except for the carbon-14 dating tests, which the scientific community agrees are not always error-free, the Shroud of Turin appears to be a genuine burial cloth from the time of Christ. But it is the image on this cloth from which the final judgment will have to be made. What made it? Whose image is it? How did it get on the cloth and remain still visible after more than 1,000 years?
Whatever the mechanism for forming the image on the shroud, it had to occur in a short period of time, act in an up and down direction, and produce an image intensity determined by the distance between the cloth and the body. One of the theories which seems to satisfy these characteristics is a coronal discharge similar to Kirlian photography or lightning.
One scientist said it's like every pore of the body suddenly fired a miniature laser beam for a split second of time. And so I'm sure that there's some power, some explanation that defies our current understanding.
And I believe that when the body of Christ was raised to that multi-dimension that scientists call in-space, that there was a little extra burst of radiation that marked the shroud.
Just maybe God did leave behind a document of the resurrection.
Well, remembering that I'm Jewish, so that I certainly don't have any biases for the cloth, and as a matter of fact was very skeptical at the beginning, I still believe the shroud is authentic because there's really no way to duplicate the quality of the image that we have there today.
Is there any way that one can know without a doubt that the Shroud of Turin is authentic? I don't think so. I think it will always remain a mystery, and maybe that's the way it should be.
If you have faith, you don't need the shroud, and if you don't have faith, it's questionable whether you'll be convinced by it. But if it makes you think about it, if it makes you consider it, then it's important.
Even Einstein said that there are dimensions beyond that which we understand.
The Shroud of Turin, at this time anyway, continues to be one of the great mysteries of the modern world. If authentic, it is the greatest, most wondrous relic of all time. If not, it is equally the greatest, most wondrous enigma of all time. There is no in-between. It is one or the other. And that makes the shroud newsworthy for tomorrow's headlines, as the world anxiously awaits additional scientific proof. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle called it gnostos, which simply means knowing. What is knowing? How do we do it? And why do we do it? After all the millennia, the human race still knows very little about knowing. Today, we know more about the microchip than we do about the largest construction ever made by man, the Great Pyramid of Egypt. We can send a man to the moon, yet are baffled by feats accomplished by our ancestors thousands of years ago. For all of today's modern technology, many questions about our past continue to remain a mystery. And this old world of ours is just full of them. Like, for instance, no, we'll save that for the next time. I'm Darren McGavin. Thank you for joining us for this intriguing look at ancient mysteries of the world.